Hello everybody.
Next up, we make the trek up to Manchester, where we'll be hosted by Manchester City. Kick-off on Wednesday evening is at 8 p.m, with coverage on Sky Sports, should you require televisual assistance. So, Man City then. Well, up till a few minutes ago, they were actually top of the league, thanks in no small part to us. By the time you read this, Arsenal will probably have temporarily replaced them. They're playing Chelsea 24 hours before our game in what will be Lampard Jr.'s 60 feet on the spin, assuming the result goes that way. City's form is that of an anti-Lampard nature, their current run comprising 10 wins and a draw since they inexplicably succumbed 1-0 to Spurs over at the Toilet Bowl back on 5th of February. City's 4-0 win over Arsenal last week was psychologically the coup de grace in the title race, and irrespective of the result in our game, the citizens will still have a game in hand over the Islington Bottlers. The difference between the clubs on the pitch appears to be that Arsenal expect their opponents to roll over for them, and to be fair, Chelsea are doing a very good impersonation of that at the moment. However, when a bit of fight is put up, they appear singularly ill-equipped to deal with it. Now contrast that with City, who were made to work a bit for their 2-1 win at Fulham at the weekend. So they did. Daisy tells me they didn't spend an awful lot during the January window. There again, why would they need to? They spent a mere £8 million in January bringing in Argentinian youngster Maximo Perrone from Vélez Sarsfield. At the age of 20, he's probably being treated as one for the future, and his appearances for Manchester City so far have been limited to 2 sub-appearances, one in the league and one in the cup. Given the paucity of signings in the winter, we ought to take a quick glance at their top scorer, some chap by the name of Erling Haaland. Now, if Manchester City were a bit stingy during the winter, they certainly made up for it last summer, with Haaland alone commanding a fee in excess of £51 million for his transfer in from Dortmund, with City taking full advantage of the rule that says financial fair play doesn't count if you've got more lawyers than UEFA. Haaland's broken loads of records this season, real records that is, unlike those attributed to Harry Kane, whose record-breaking prowess is largely a figment of Tottenham's PR department's imagination. Across all competitions, Haaland has scored 50 goals. Imagine that, 50. And his next goal in the league will give him the Premier League season record, nicking it from Alan Shearer and Andy Cole, and both of those had the luxury of a 42-game season to play with. Remember, we're only 33 games or so into this one. Let's face it, there's quality and abundance all over the shop. For example, in Kevin De Bruyne, they have a player whose lack of a Footballer of the Year award is purely down to the Liverpool supporting members of the Football Writers Association voting together for Jordan Henderson in one of the biggest miscarriages of sporting justice in memory. Think about it, are there any circumstances under which you'd pick Henderson ahead of De Bruyne? I don't know, maybe if there were a tragic accident in which De Bruyne had suffered a double amputation below the knees, though even then you'd be thinking about asking him how he felt about the second half and pointing out the savings in the cost of shin pads. So, to summarise, they're very good and they're likely to win the league, so I'm not going to waste too much time going on about them and sending both me and you into a deep depression over what is to come. I will instead move on to the wild and wacky world of association football. This weekend's headlines were prompted by the charmless and overhyped Jurgen Klopp. Clipperty ran a full 20 yards down the touchline to shout at the fourth official when they scored the winner against Spurs at the weekend. Somehow Klopp managed to get all astonished at the fact he received a yellow card for his efforts from ref Tierney. He seems to have a problem with us, was Klopp's lament on receiving the thoroughly deserved sanction, before going on to suggest that Tierney had said something that was unacceptable. Unfortunately for Klopp, and perhaps fortunately for the wider world of football, this is one lie that might well come back to bite him on the backside. Referees are wired up, and PGMOL are adamant that nothing untoward was said, which mean that there's likely to be proof that Klopp is lying. Though usually you only have to see his lips move for proof of that. Liverpool do have previous with this sort of thing. It's not that long ago that they were fined and banned from signing schoolboy players, having denied offering to make illegal payments to a player on Stoke City's books, a defence that lasted really well, right up to the point the player's dad dug out the recording he'd made of the conversation. Meanwhile, Klopp later suggested that he'd been punished for his actions this weekend by pulling his hamstring during the incident. That would be the gods of football karma getting involved, Klopp. Meanwhile, if Tierney does have a problem with the Scousers, it's probably due to their lack of gratitude towards an organisation that's been handing them 3 points left, right and centre for years. Their winner against Spurs came courtesy of a player who'd have been sent off had he played for any other club. Klopp should have the book thrown at him. He's already had a £30,000 fine and a warning as to his future conduct under his belt already this season. And I see that the FA have now brought a charge before the Independent Disciplinary Commission, presumably on the grounds that punishments from the gods of football karma have no force in law. So let's see if the authorities have the minerals to do the job they singularly failed to do in dealing with the Robertson incident a few weeks back. Meanwhile, if Mr Moyes gets a tug from the beak over his comments that suggested the Scousers get favourable treatment, he should merely point them to a video of the Spurs match and say, "My case rests." Which brings us on to us. And yes, refereeing again. Now, let me get one thing clear. We stunk the place out at the death trap that is Selhurst Park, making a poor side look, well, nearly adequate. As a consequence of that, there will be those who will argue that we deserve nothing out of the game. However, unless I'm much mistaken, the general principle is that matches are decided on the number of legitimate goals scored by the sides participating in the match, as opposed to any form of artistic merit. One could easily argue that any side that lets in 3 goals to a side playing as badly as we did is equally undeserving of anything out of the game. I've endured plenty of matches over the years where we've been undone by the opponent's only attack of the game, so I'm painfully aware of that. In this case, we had a referee making a horrendous error, hoping to be bailed out by his equally inept colleague back at Stockley Park. The straw clutched at was the fact that there had been minimal contact, which in any case had occurred well after the dive had commenced. And I said right from the very start of VAR that it had the potential to be a godsend as long as it was used properly. I also warned that there were serious issues with the competency of the officials provided by PGMOL on a week-to-week basis, and that there was every possibility that an official who made technical errors in a live situation could easily replicate those errors when watching the same stuff as part of a recording. Against Liverpool, we were stitched up because a ref ignored the laws of the game, and in this one, if we're being charitable, we might say that Paulson might have had the best angle to see what everybody else in the ground knew. However, both of those 2 decisions should have been easily overturned had the VAR officials undertaken their job with a view to coming to the correct decision, rather than, as seems to have been the case, trying to find a way of covering up the refereeing errors. VAR will never be a success while the people operating it are doing so dishonestly, and given that PGMOL's priority is to protect its employees irrespective of damage done to the game, that isn't going to change anytime soon. The sooner the FA takes up the responsibility so shamefully abrogated on the grounds of cost and takes the whole refereeing thing in-house, as actually required by FIFA rules, the better it'll be all round for the good of the game. If nothing else, the assessment procedures should be taken out of PGMOL's hands so they can no longer rely on themselves marking their own homework. Another thing that needs sorting out is the away section at Selhurst Park. Quite frankly, it's a complete disgrace. Now, I know we say this every year, but nothing ever seems to be done. On entering the ground, you're presented with a confined space which is already full to bursting, with people backed up to the stairs that lead to the seats. So you've got a full pen and you're feeding more and more people in to the extent that you can barely clear the turnstile on your way in. Frankly, it's a good job that we're not one of those clubs whose supporters routinely turn up in their hundreds without valid tickets or with forgeries, or the position there would be even worse. The kick-off was delayed on Saturday by problems with their season ticket entry system, and a full investigation was promised over the PA, though sadly that won't involve an inquiry into who exactly at the Sports Ground Safety Authority decided that corner of the ground is safe. You may have gleaned that I'm not the biggest fan of the Olympic as it stands, but at least I don't feel like I'm taking my life in my hands every time I walk across the bridge. The worst news from the visit to Croydon was the injury to Zuma, which current speculation suggests might well be season-ending. Our backline never looked comfortable in the absence of Zuma, something which doesn't bode well for the next few weeks. Mr Moyes' comments that the player is, quote, a quick healer, unquote, are very nice, but I detect an air more of hope than expectation. So, the prediction then. Well, let's face it, we're on a hiding to nothing for this one, aren't we? They've got a Premier League title to win, so unless we get some sort of bonkers and perverse refereeing decision in our favour, which on current form I suppose is not completely out of the question, I can't see us getting anything up there. So the £2.50 that I was going to pay the Sports Ground Safety Authority to approve the 50-foot square patch of green outside the back of the Avran Grant Olympic Rest Home for the Bewildered as a safe space for up to 50,000 supporters will instead, with very heavy heart, be going on a home win. Make it 3-0 to them then, please, Mr. Winston. Enjoy the game.